Today we're moving ahead almost 9 centuries ahead of when the last tornado we did a video on occurred, to talk about one that is rather infamous and still a haunting, living memory for many. Today we return to the 1974 tornado super outbreak to cover yet another one of the F5 tornadoes. One that I hadn't thought of much before starting my research for this video, I'll admit, but now one that I think might be one of the scariest tornadoes I have ever done a video on. Last time we talked about this outbreak, we covered the two F5s that struck Tanner, Alabama during the storm. And for this video, we're staying in Alabama to talk about a different beast. The 1974 Guin, Alabama F5 tornado. Guin is a city in Marion County, Alabama, incorporated in 1889. Early in its time as a settlement, the town's main export seems to have been lumber, and from these beginnings, it grew into the city that, in 1974, would find itself in the path of a monster. During the time of the outbreak, the population of Guin was around 2,200 going off of the 1970 United States Census. All of them were about to be affected by the tornado that was going to tear a path through essentially the center of the city. This tornado would prove to be a real worst-case scenario twister. Now, if you've seen my Tanner or Xenia videos, this backstory is going to sound familiar. To save some time, I'm just going to summarize what I said in the Tanner video since it was the same storm, and it would start to get repetitive if I just read through it all again, especially if you've been here long enough to see those other videos. So, on April 1st, 1974, there was a powerful low-pressure system developing across the interior plains of North America throughout the day. As I said in the Xenia video, Mother Nature was just about to pull a real knee slapper of an April Fool's joke on this one, only we were going to be the ones she pulled the joke on. The storm was further intensified by a surge of highly moist air merging with it as it moved into the Mississippi and Ohio Valley areas, and the result was a clash of warm and cold air on different sides of the storm. A surge of warm, moist air came up from the Gulf of Mexico and essentially covered the states that would be struck with a blanket of warm, humid air. NOAA and the National Weather Service forecast severe weather to strike on April 3rd, but no one could have predicted what happened next. April 3rd had at least one tornado before the actual outbreak occurred. Again, I covered this in my Xenia video. This one occurred in Indiana. And as the day dawned, severe weather watches and warnings were going out from the Great Lakes down to the southern states. The Indiana tornado was just the prelude to the show because the actual outbreak was about to kick off. Again, as I said in the Xenia video, Ohio was it was about to get decimated. Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, they were all going to be struck by F5s. But for this video, we're going to be looking at the southern states. If you want to hear a little bit more about the backstory of the storms or the northern states that were struck, check out my DePaul F5 and Xenia F5 tornado videos. I'll link them at the end. Tanner, Alabama was about to be hit by two separate F5 tornadoes less than an hour apart from one another, but Guin would get its own beast. In this area of the country, conditions allowed for strong successive supercells to form. Many of these produced long-tracked, devastating tornadoes. This part of the country was going to see some of the worst storms of the entire outbreak. More than one tornado that this storm would produce would be on the ground for over 100 miles. And this brings us to Guin. The Guin tornado would be one of these long-track monsters. The Guin, Alabama tornado first touched down in Mississippi around 8:30 p.m. local time. Yes, this was also going to be a nocturnal monster on top of being an F5. A recipe for disaster was quickly falling into place here. It first impacted Alabama north of the city of Vernon. The tornado then moved into Marion County, and then it, and this quote just stood out to me so much that I had to reread it a few times, quote, probably became the most powerful tornado ever observed in Alabama, end quote. It was also the deadliest tornado in the state since 1932. I'm guessing since the 1932 Deep South tornado outbreak, which I hadn't even heard of, but honestly, I should talk about someday because, wow, for something kind of obscure, it was devastating. For now, though, let's stay on topic. When the tornado struck, Guin's downtown area was obliterated. Many brick buildings and businesses were completely swept away and destroyed. Several churches were destroyed, residential areas were torn apart, and rubble from homes was thrown and scattered across the area. Trees were stripped of their bark, and noticeable ground scouring occurred. Yards were swept clean of their grass and left barren. Becky Todd, who courageously told her story in a 2014 article, heard the roar outside at around 9 p.m. She realized that her husband George, and 5 children needed to go to shelter. The pair got their handicapped daughter Jana out of her wheelchair and started to the neighbor's house to get in the basement and got a quarter of a mile down the road, as Becky Todd recalled. I looked down the road and saw the twister. I said, "Here it is. You better hold on." That sounds like an utter nightmare. Remember, it was dark out at this point. I cannot imagine hearing a tornado coming, running down the road to get to a neighbor's house who has a basement, only to see it's already on top of you and there's no outrunning it. All the family could do, from how I read it, was essentially brace for it. Jana was thrown into a yard and she ended up okay, but 2 of the couple's 5 children, Paul and Mark, 19 and 12 years old, died. George sustained a serious head injury and was in the hospital for a month after the storm, and he did not get to attend his children's funeral. Paul and Mark were buried in the Guin City Cemetery. Nearby is also Jana, who died in the 1990s. George is also buried there, having passed away in 2013. 49-year-old Jamie Heron was closing up his service station in Guin that night when the tornado hit. The building collapsed on top of him, and he was killed. Elsewhere in Guin, Ellen Gilmore, aged 50, was in her family's trailer with her husband Hamp and their children when the tornado struck. The whole family was tossed clear from the mobile home, each member of the family being injured. Ellen was found in a parking lot of the nearby Methodist church, but she passed from her injuries later on at the hospital on April 4th. Hamp had a severely broken arm. The Norwood family were actually split up when the tornado hit. 21-year-old Rex Norwood had moved out of the family home and rented a room in downtown Guin. He was talking to his landlady that evening about how dark the sky had gotten. "She told me to put her dog in her car and go to a nearby church," Rex said. Her house was demolished, and the church Rex had been planning to go to for protection was destroyed. The tornado caught them while Rex and the dog were still in the car, and the dog did not survive. Rex's chest was punctured by flying sticks, and the roof of the car was caved in on him, pressing on his skull. A friend of his, Randy Tice, found him in the car, and with the help of Rex's brother Tommy, who he had to go get before coming back, they got him out of the car. Rex was rushed to the hospital, had 4 surgeries, 2 on his head, 1 for repairing damage for his lungs, and 1 for a hemorrhage in his esophagus. He survived, but he had lost the ability to speak. In July, Rex began a therapy program to learn how to talk again. Another Guin resident, Robert Pennington, had left home at 6 p.m. that day to go to work. He said, "At 9 o'clock, our two-way radio went out. The manager and his wife were in the office at that time. I got in the pickup truck out front and told the manager I would go up on the hill to talk to the men out in Lamar County. I met the tornado head-on in the middle of Guin in my pickup truck." I just gotta say, the fact that this tornado just snuck up on people so easily is frightening. It's honestly like I'm reading a horror monster encounter stories with this one. It's just honest ramblings I put into my script here, but I think that this might be one of the most chilling tornadoes I have ever covered. Robert actually survived his close call. He crouched down in the seat of the truck as it was pelted with debris and came out of it on the other side with only minor cuts and bruising. Once the tornado had passed, he left the truck and ran to where his home had been. He said that there was no sign of our house, its foundation, framing, or anything. My wife was gone. Her body was found near Yankee Street, about a block away shortly after. A picture taken of the area where their home had been shows it just wiped clean of everything except a few knocked over trees. Billy Joe Brown and his family, including his wife Virginia and their 16-year-old daughter Janet, lived on Yankee Street, and across the road from them lived Robert Baker and his family. Baker had, after his home was damaged in a tornado in 1956, built a 12 by 12 feet concrete shelter right next to his house. That night, 14 people sheltered together in that storm cellar. It shielded them from the tornado as everything else around it was literally wiped away as if with an eraser. Even the ground next to the cellar itself was partially swept away by the tornado. As you can see in pictures of it, it looks partially excavated. These stories and more are all from a site called Tornado Talk. There's so many first-hand stories about the Guin tornado on this page that I can't include them all without this video being at least an hour long. I'm going to leave it linked in the description if you'd like to read more of them. I just touched the stories on the surface, like that, when it comes to the amount of them. It's incredible. It is probably the biggest collection of first-hand accounts I have found since doing the Tri-State Tornado video. And I will include one more story from it, but a little bit later in the video. You see, this page not only includes stories from Guin, it includes stories that occurred all along the 100-plus mile long track of this tornado. For now, back to the wider picture of Guin as a whole. The National Weather Service damage surveyor Bill Herman said that the damage in one specific 6-block area was, just like the ground had been swept clean, it was just as much of a total wipeout as you can have. Again, some of the pictures on Tornado Talk show this. He's not wrong. The ground is just bare. It looks like nothing had ever been there. Building foundations were also described as dislodged, and in some cases, swept away as well. As it struck Guin, the tornado was so wide that it enveloped most of the city. The downtown area was hit by the southeastern side of the circulation. Almost every building and business around here was damaged or destroyed. The Guin First United Methodist Church was obliterated all the way down to its brick base. City Hall was destroyed, the post office was destroyed, and the Guin mobile home plant was destroyed. Immediately after the tornado passed, employees began searching the mangled, twisted-up rubble for essential records and other materials. Don Drury, the general manager, said that it was unbelievable. The damage was so sudden and so complete, it left us all with a hollow feeling. I am extremely proud of our people and the spirit which they displayed by pitching in with a will-do attitude. 23 people were killed, and 250, maybe even as many as 332, were left injured amid the ruins. And after leaving Guin, the tornado struck the rural community of Delamar, a place with a lot of history, actually. I went down a little rabbit hole while doing my research for this video. I actually touched on some of it in my first draft, but I cut it for tighter pacing. 5 people were killed here, homes and other structures were destroyed, and the buildings that were left undamaged had no power or water or phone service for days. Mobile homes were found wrapped around trees in this area. The tornado was still moving at around 55 miles an hour. It also struck Huntsville and damaged the Redstone Arsenal U.S. Army base. The tornado had grown to a mile wide at this point. Next, it tore through the William B. Bankhead National Forest, which the one I work on got hit by a tornado this year, but it was only an EF0, maybe EF1 tornado. I cannot imagine what an F5 would have done to it, nor do I even want to. Entire sections of the forest were flattened, and surveyors noted that the damage was consistent at all elevations, no matter whether the trees were growing on exposed ridges or down in gorges. On screen is what mine looked like. And now, though it is kind of hard to tell, here's an aerial image of the National Forest area that was hit by this tornado. The last story we'll cover of those impacted occurred near the end of the tornado's life. The story of the Odin family. Virginia Sue Odin, her husband Herman, and their son Stevie, as well as Virginia's mother. They'd been watching TV until around an hour before they were struck by the tornado. They knew one was heading into their area, but figured it would blow on around them. Just as Virginia Odin was about to fall asleep, a sudden strong wind and rain jolted her back awake. A few moments later, the tornado hit their home. The last clear image Virginia had of being inside the house was trying to get to Stevie as the tornado was tearing the home apart around them. The last thing she said she saw before she found herself in the yard was seeing his bed turning over. The next thing the family knew was that they were in the yard. Herman attempted to drive them all to the hospital, but the roads were impassable due to downed power lines, so Herman lifted them and Virginia drove the car under the lines. Virginia's mother had the worst of the injuries by far, but all 4 of them survived by some miracle. Virginia said after this incident, she started putting more attention toward bad-looking clouds in the sky instead of going to bed when knowing a bad storm was coming. By the time the tornado finally lifted south of Basham, the tornado had been on the ground for over 100 miles, and it had been on the ground for over 2 hours. It destroyed 546 structures. Over half of the 77 deaths in Alabama that occurred in the 1974 super outbreak occurred because of the 2 tornadoes that hit Tanner. But this one was also a killer, taking 28 or maybe even up to 32 lives. If you remember the Todd family I mentioned earlier, well, their neighbor, Mildred McGuire, was also there, and she recalled the aftermath of the tornado in 2014. She said that the area looked like a war zone. People were dirty, bloody, and their hands were reaching out to me. Teenage ham radio operator James Spann from Tuscaloosa was also caught up in the aftermath. He was asked to take his radio to the emergency room in Jasper to help with communications. He drove through Guin, and he said he saw things that night that changed my life. The grotesque nature of the wounds is something I have not talked about, even to this day in 2014. He had night terrors for weeks, but he said seeing the lives of precious people lost changed him, and it gave him the passions to do what I do. The object is to prevent something like this from happening again. Other places hit hard by the twister included the Cashin Motel, Alabama OK Flooring, Royal Furniture, the American Legion, and many more. Those are just the tip of the iceberg. The residential area of the city fared no better. The very center of the tornado ripped through that section of the city. 2 of the homes destroyed and the northwestern side of Guin were annihilated all the way down to the foundations, and these 2 were rated F5 strength by Ted Fujita himself. On April 5th, Governor of Georgia Jimmy Carter declared that 13 counties in the state was a disaster area and requested President Nixon for aid. Wheelchair-bound Alabama Governor George Wallace visited Tanner following the back-to-back F5 tornadoes that struck there. The outbreak as a whole left so much devastation in its wake that on April 10th, the Disaster Relief Act of 1974 was passed unanimously in the United States Senate. President Nixon signed it into law in late May. In 2014, a 40th anniversary memorial service for the event was held in Guin. Hundreds were in attendance. The Tornado Talk page I mentioned had an interesting section of additional research showing some possible errors in the official research and surveying done back in 1974. Again, it is an interesting read, and again, it is linked below in the description. So what are my thoughts as just some YouTuber talking about this story over 50 years later? Honestly, as I said at the beginning, this was one of the scariest tornadoes I've ever read about, and some of the most harrowing first-hand accounts of a tornado I have ever read. You see, I never thought I would feel more fear towards one than maybe the tri-state when reading those first-hand accounts, but this one just really got to me. I think it may have been the nocturnal element of it, 2, the strength of it, and 3, just how it kept sneaking up on people. I honestly think this might be one of, if not the scariest tornado I have ever done a video on, and I'm glad I finally got to it. Again, I hadn't really thought much of this one when I started doing the F5s of the 1974 Outbreak series, and yeah, I didn't think this one would be anything, too different, but it really was, and I'm glad I finally talked to it. And I do want to hear what you all thought as well, so tell me in a comment. I do read them all. And at this point, I feel like I need to just finish the F5s of the 1974 Super Outbreak series prompt that I started this whole tornado series with, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the Cincinnati tornado next, and then when we are done with that, I will be open to suggestions once again. I do take them. The Flint Beecher tornado was a suggested topic, so I do take suggestions. Again, I read all the comments. Share any that you have, and I'll see you soon for the Cincinnati Sailor Park tornado, and then we'll keep going and finish the 1974 outbreak of tornadoes by the end of the year, and go into next year with a clean slate. Despite me originally wanting to do the 1974 Outbreak F5s closer together when I first did the Xenia video, I've actually only done the Xenia tornado, a rare case of damage being so intense that Ted Fujita himself even gave that one a preliminary F6 rating, the DePaul tornado, and the Tanner double F5s. Counting this one now, there are still 2 more to go. So next time it'll be the Cincinnati tornado, and then we'll go right to the 1974 Brandenburg, Kentucky tornado to finally wrap this little series up As for what I might start talking about after that, I will think about it and give you an update at the end of the Cincinnati video. So stay tuned and please stick around in the meantime and check out the others that I've talked about if you haven't seen them already. And again, please suggest ones to talk about in the future. Thank you for watching. Have a good one, everyone.